My hard-won Saturday morning peace was shattered by a text from my ex, demanding $30,000 and a bag of food. The golden light of a perfect Saturday morning streamed through my kitchen window, catching the steam rising from my coffee cup. Outside, the world was a gentle hum of lawnmowers and distant birdsong. Inside, the rich aroma of a dark roast filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of the lavender. My girlfriend, Sarah, insisted on keeping in a small vase on the counter. It was peaceful. It was calm. It was a life I had fought tooth and nail to build for myself, a sanctuary carved out of the wreckage of my past. For 3 years, I had woken up to mornings like this, each one a quiet victory, a confirmation that I had escaped. And then my phone buzzed. It was lying face up on the granite countertop, a sleek black rectangle of potential disruption. I glanced at it, expecting a notification from a news app or a message from a friend about our plans for the evening. But the number was unfamiliar. A local area code, but not one I recognized. A single message glowed on the screen. "Hey, you there, it's me." Just 4 words. It's me. As if the universe only contained one possible me who would text me out of the blue from an unknown number. But a cold dread, a phantom limb of an old anxiety began to ache in my chest. I knew exactly who it was. Chloe, my ex, the architect of the chaos I had so meticulously escaped. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the block button. I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, not since the day I finally packed a single suitcase, changed my number, and drove 7 hours to a new city without so much as a goodbye note. It was an act of self-preservation, the only way to sever the 1,000 tiny threads she used to control my life, my finances, and my sanity. Ignoring the text, I took a long sip of my coffee, the warmth doing little to quell the chill spreading through me. I would not engage. I would not let the ghost of my past ruin my perfect Saturday. A minute later, the phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. My jaw tightened. I knew I shouldn't look, but the pull was magnetic, like watching a car crash in slow motion. I picked up the phone. A new message had appeared beneath the first one, a block of text that seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. 2. Parents are waiting for you on Sunday. Don't forget 30 $30 for medicine and a bag of food. I read it once, then twice. My brain felt like it had short-circuited. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just a request, it was a demand, phrased as a casual reminder, like I'd forgotten to pick up milk on the way home. The exclamation point felt like a jab in the eye. Parents are waiting for you. Her parents, Mark and Susan. A wave of nausea washed over me as I pictured their faces, their thin, disapproving smiles that never quite reached their eyes. During the 5 years I was with Chloe, they had perfected the art of looking at me like I was both a disappointment and a walking, talking wallet. But it was the rest of the message that sent my mind reeling. $30,000. The number was so specific, so insane it felt like a typo. 30 $30 for medicine. What medicine? For whom? The vagueness was a classic Chloe tactic, designed to create a sense of urgent, life-or-death mystery that only she could solve, provided I funded the solution. And then, the final surreal twist of the knife. And a bag of food. It was so bizarre, so completely tone-deaf, it was almost comical. It was as if she'd thought, well, while he's cutting a check for a down payment on a house, he might as well grab some bread and eggs. It was a glimpse into a mind so profoundly entitled, so disconnected from reality, that she saw no difference between a life-altering sum of money and a grocery run. A familiar, hot spike of rage, an emotion I hadn't truly felt in 3 years, shot through my veins. This wasn't just an ex asking for money. This was an attempt to drag me back into the vortex, back to the days of constant manufactured crises. The emergency car repairs for a car she'd crashed while texting. The once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity that required a few $1,000s and evaporated a week later. The rent money I'd paid for her apartment, even after I moved out because she'd sworn she'd pay me back as soon as her freelance checks came in. Every single time, her parents would be in the background wringing their hands, telling me what a good man I was for helping our little girl out. They weren't just enablers, they were active participants in the long con. "Everything okay, honey?" Sarah's voice cut through my haze of anger. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in her fluffy white robe, her brow furrowed with concern. She'd seen the look on my face, the one I thought I'd left behind in my old life, the look of a man cornered. For a moment, I considered lying, saying it was just a spam text, but I had promised myself and her that there would be no secrets in this new life. We built our relationship on a foundation of honesty, a direct response to the mountain of lies I had lived under with Chloe. Without a word, I handed her my phone. I watched her eyes scan the screen. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to a quiet, protective fury I had never seen in her before. "Oh, hell no," she whispered, her voice tight. "Is this her?" I just nodded, the anger in my chest deflating into a heavy, weary dread. $30,000? Sarah said, her voice rising in disbelief. "And a bag of food. Is she insane?" "That's a question I stopped asking myself a long time ago," I said, my voice hoarse. "The answer is probably yes, but it doesn't really matter." I took the phone back from her, my hand shaking slightly. How did she even get this number? I had been so careful. I'd told no one from my old life where I was going. It felt like a violation, like she'd reached through time and space to claw her way back into my sanctuary. Sarah wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "You're not responding to that, are you? You're just going to block her and we're going to go about our beautiful Saturday." "Of course," I said, trying to force a confidence I didn't feel. "I'm blocking her right now." But as my thumb moved toward the screen, the phone began to vibrate, the discordant buzz echoing loudly in the quiet kitchen. The unknown number was no longer just texting. It was calling. The screen flashed with the incoming call, demanding an answer, an acknowledgement. It was an escalation, a refusal to be ignored. Sarah's grip on me tightened. We both stared at the vibrating phone on the counter, a venomous snake that had slithered into our paradise. I could feel the pull, the old toxic instinct to answer, to manage the crisis, to make it go away. It was a reflex she had beaten into me over 5 long years. I thought I had escaped. I thought I was free. But as the phone continued its relentless ringing, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that she wasn't just knocking at the door of my past. She was trying to kick it down. My fingers stabbed the red decline icon on the screen with a force that surprised me. The ringing stopped, plunging the kitchen back into a heavy silence. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Without a second thought, I navigated to the contact, my hands slick with a nervous sweat, and blocked the number. Blocked and reported as spam, a digital exorcism. I let out a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was done. She was gone. Again. "Good," Sarah said softly, her arms still wrapped around me. "That's it. You did the right thing. She's a ghost. You don't have to talk to ghosts." But she didn't feel like a ghost. She felt terrifyingly real, a specter who had just proven she could pierce the veil between my past and my present any time she wished. I sank onto a bar stool, running my hands through my hair. The coffee on the counter was cold now. "It's the way she worded it," I said, the words tumbling out. "Parents are waiting for you on Sunday. Like it's a family barbecue I stupidly forgot about. Like I haven't spent 3 years deliberately building a new life 100 miles away from them." "They're a package deal, aren't they?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with a protective anger. "Her and her parents." I nodded, a bitter taste in my mouth. Always. It was their whole routine. Chloe would create the 5-alarm fire, and they would play the concerned, helpless bystanders. They'd corner me at family dinners, their faces a perfect mask of sorrow. "She has such a big heart, you know," Susan would say, dabbing at a dry eye. "She just gets in over her head sometimes." And then Mark would clap me on the shoulder, his grip a little too tight. "You're so steady, son. You're good for her. We don't know what we'd do without you." It was a script, a well-rehearsed play where I was the hero, the savior, and the ATM, all rolled into one. They made me feel like leaving her wasn't just breaking up with a girlfriend, it was abandoning a helpless, fragile family. "They weren't helpless," Sarah stated, her tone firm as steel. "They were accomplices, and you are not their son, and you're not her savior anymore." She was right. I knew she was right. But years of conditioning were hard to unwire. Chloe and her family hadn't just taken my money. They had systematically dismantled my sense of self, rebuilding it to suit their needs. I was the reliable one. the responsible one, the one who cleaned up the messes, the one who paid, and the most insidious part? For a long time, I believed it. I wore the responsibility like a badge of honor, blind to the fact that it was actually a yoke. The biggest question clawed at my mind. How did she get my number, Sarah? I changed it. I never gave it to any of our old mutual friends. I scrubbed my old social media. It's like she hired a private investigator just to demand grocery money. The joke fell flat, tasting like ash in my mouth. Don't go down that rabbit hole, Sarah warned gently. It doesn't matter how. All that matters is that she's blocked. Her line to you is cut. She can't do anything else. We tried to salvage the day. We forced ourselves to stick to our plans, a stubborn act of defiance against the shadow that had fallen over our morning. We went to the farmer's market, bought fresh bread and tomatoes that smelled of sunshine, and pretended to be the happy, carefree couple we had been just a few hours before. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time a phone buzzed in the crowd, my head would snap around. Every person who lingered a little too long in my peripheral vision felt like a potential spy. I was back in that state of hypervigilance she used to keep me in, constantly waiting for the next crisis, the next manufactured drama. By the time evening fell, a fragile peace had settled. We were back in the apartment, our sanctuary. We ordered Thai food, our favorite comfort meal, and put on a mindless action movie. We sat curled together on the couch under a soft blanket, the flashing lights of the TV screen illuminating the room. For an hour, it almost worked. For an hour, I could almost believe that blocking the number had been enough, that the crisis had been averted. I rested my head on Sarah's shoulder, the familiar scent of her shampoo calming my frayed nerves. Maybe she was right. Maybe the ghost had been banished. Then a soft buzz vibrated through the couch cushion. It was her phone. Sarah glanced down at it, a mild annoyance on her face at the interruption. Her thumb swiped across the screen. I watched as her casual expression dissolved. It didn't crumble in stages. It vanished instantly, replaced by a stark, white mask of shock. Her breath hitched. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, were locked on the small, glowing screen. "What is it?" I asked, my own blood turning to ice. She didn't answer. She couldn't seem to form the words. Slowly, like she was holding something venomous, she turned the phone towards me. It was an Instagram notification, a message request. The profile name was a meaningless jumble of letters, but I recognized the photo, a heavily filtered picture of a sunset over a beach, a photo I had taken myself on a vacation with Chloe 6 years ago. My heart stopped. I took the phone from her trembling hand. There was the photo, and below it, a single line of text from the Phantom account. My eyes struggled to focus on the words, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. The message wasn't a demand or a plea. It was a photo, a crystal-clear picture, taken from across the street of the front entrance to our apartment building, our home. The red brick facade, the black iron railings, the potted ferns by the door all perfectly, terrifyingly captured. And underneath the picture, one more chilling sentence. "I drove by your old place first. I'm glad you're doing well. I'll just stop by tomorrow so we can talk. No need to bring food. Mom already went shopping." The world narrowed to the glowing screen in my hand. The picture of my building, our home, wasn't just a picture. It was a statement. "I know where you are. The walls you built mean nothing. I can reach you whenever I want." The casual, almost friendly tone of the message was more menacing than any threat she could have screamed. "I'm glad you're doing well." It was a mockery, a twisted distortion of well wishes that dripped with malice. And the final line, "No need to bring food, Mom already went shopping," was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. It was a deliberate callback to her initial text, designed to make me feel foolish, to reframe her insane demand as a simple misunderstanding. It was gaslighting in its purest form. She hadn't asked for money and groceries. She was just trying to arrange a family reunion. "She's here," I whispered, the words feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. "She's in the city." Sarah shot up from the couch, the blanket pooling at her feet. The movie still played on the TV, a meaningless series of explosions and witty one-liners that felt like they were from a different universe. No way. How could she possibly have found us? She began pacing the length of our living room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. How did she find our address? "I don't know." My voice cracked. a surge of adrenaline and fear making me feel dizzy. I jumped up and went to the window, peering through the blinds like a fugitive. The street below was quiet, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. A few cars passed by, their headlights sweeping across the pavement. Was she out there right now? Watching? A shudder racked my body. The sanctuary had been breached. The locks on our doors suddenly felt as flimsy as paper. "This is insane," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "This is stalking. We should call the police." "And tell them what?" I said, turning from the window, the bitter reality of the situation crashing down on me. "My ex-girlfriend sent me a picture of my apartment building and said she wants to stop by. They'll laugh at us. They'll tell me to block her number. There's no explicit threat. She's smart, Sarah. She's always been smart about this. She knows exactly how to walk the line, how to make me feel terrified without ever saying a single word that would hold up in a police report. I'll just stop by tomorrow so we can talk." It sounds so reasonable, doesn't it? My phone, still clutched in my hand, buzzed again. We both flinched. It wasn't a text or a call. It was a notification from my banking app. My stomach lurched. With a sense of impending doom, I opened it. It was a transaction alert. $30,000. My mind went blank. Did she somehow get into my account? Did her parents co-sign on an old loan I'd forgotten about? My finger trembled as I tapped the notification to see the details. It wasn't a withdrawal. It was a Zelle request from Chloe. The memo line contained just 3 words: "For the medicine." I let out a harsh, incredulous laugh that sounded more like a sob. The sheer nerve. After finding my address, after sending a menacing photo, she had followed it up with a payment request, as if it were an invoice for services rendered. It was a power move, a digital paper trail designed to legitimize her absurd demand. It was her saying, "See? This is a real debt. I've officially requested it." She sent me a Zelle request for $30,000, I told Sarah, showing her the phone. Sarah stared at it, her face pale. "She's not just trying to get money, is she? This is about control. This is about proving she can still get to you, that she can still make you dance." She was right. The money was secondary. It was always secondary. The real prize for Chloe was the chaos, the power she wielded by turning my life upside down. The $30,000 was just the sledgehammer she was using to smash through my front door. I began to pace, the same frantic energy that had gripped Sarah now coursing through me. I couldn't think straight. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of old memories and new fears. I remembered the time she lost her passport the day before a non-refundable international trip I had paid for, and the subsequent miraculous recovery of it after I'd spent a frantic 4 hours and $500 on emergency replacement services. I remembered the sudden mysterious illnesses that would strike her right before a major deadline I had at work, requiring me to drop everything to take her to an emergency room where doctors could never find anything wrong. Every crisis was a performance, and I was always the unwilling audience and stagehand. "Okay," Sarah said, her voice suddenly calm and decisive. She walked over and took my hands, forcing me to stop pacing and look at her. "Okay, breathe. We are not going to let her win. We are not her victims. We need a plan." Her strength was an anchor in my storm. I took a deep breath, trying to force the panic down. "A plan, right. What's the plan? We can't stay here tomorrow. She said she's coming by." "No," Sarah said firmly. "We are not running. This is our home. We are not letting her chase us out of our home. We stay. We lock the doors. We don't answer if she rings the bell. We call the police the second she steps on the property and refuses to leave." "And what about her parents?" I asked, the thought of them appearing on my doorstep making my skin crawl. The message said they were waiting. What if she brings them with her? What if all 3 of them are standing outside our door tomorrow? Sarah's jaw was set. "Then we don't answer for all 3 of them. Look at me. You owe them nothing. Not your time, not your money, and damn sure not your peace. We are a fortress. Understand?" I nodded, drawing strength from her resolve. A fortress. We spent the next hour fortifying our home. We double-checked the locks on the windows. We put the security bar on the front door. We closed all the blinds. Every creak of the old building, every footstep in the hallway outside sent a fresh jolt of anxiety through me. I felt like I was back in a nightmare I'd already woken up from. Exhausted but wired, we finally went to bed around 2 a.m. Sleep felt impossible. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every manipulative conversation, every manufactured crisis, every dollar I had given her over 5 years. It was a highlight reel of my own stupidity. How could I have been so blind? Just as I was starting to drift into a shallow, uneasy sleep, a sound pierced the silence of the night. It was a soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump coming from the living room. My eyes snapped open. Sarah was already sitting bolt upright in bed, her body rigid. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, my heart pounding in my throat. I strained my ears, trying to place the sound. It wasn't the building settling. It wasn't the neighbors. It was something else. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like someone was knocking. Not on our door, but on our window. The living room window that faced the fire escape. Slowly, silently, I slipped out of bed. My bare feet were cold against the hardwood floor. The thumping stopped, replaced by an unnerving silence. Every horror movie instinct screamed at me to stay in the bedroom and call 911, but a different, more primal urge took over. I had to know. I had to see. I crept through the short hallway, my body tensed for a fight. The living room was bathed in the faint, ambient light from the street outside, casting long, distorted shadows across the furniture. My eyes darted to the large window. The blinds were shut tight, just as we had left them. There was nothing. I was about to dismiss it as my frayed nerves playing tricks on me when my phone, which I'd left on the coffee table, lit up the darkness. It was a new text message from the same anonymous Instagram account. My breath caught in my chest. With a sense of dread so profound it felt like I was drowning, I picked up the phone. The message contained another picture. This one was dark, grainy, and taken from a strange, high angle. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. It was a picture of me, of us, asleep in our bed, taken from the doorway of our bedroom just moments ago. And then I saw the second message, sent just seconds after the picture. It had only 2 words. "Wrong window." A guttural, primal sound escaped my throat, a choked gasp of pure terror. The phone slipped from my nerveless fingers and clattered onto the floor. The picture on the screen burned itself into my retinas. The dark room, the tangle of sheets. Sarah and I completely vulnerable, completely oblivious, captured by an intruder. The message, "Wrong window," wasn't a confession of a mistake. It was a boast. It was Chloe telling me, "I could have been standing right over you. I can get inside whenever I want." The fire escape had been a feint, a magician's misdirection designed to draw my attention while she was already inside the house. "What is it? What's wrong?" Sarah's voice was a panicked whisper from the bedroom. She had heard me make that sound. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My entire body was locked in a state of paralyzing fear. My home, my sanctuary, my fortress. It had been violated in the most intimate way imaginable. She had been in our bedroom. How? How did she get in? My mind raced, frantically trying to find a logical explanation, but there was none. We had locked the door. We had set the security bar. We were on the 3rd floor. It was impossible, and yet the proof was glowing on the phone screen at my feet. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the silence. A soft, metallic click. It came from the front door. It was the sound of the deadbolt turning, from the inside. That single click shattered my paralysis and replaced it with a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. She was still here. She was in my apartment toying with us, and now she was leaving. The fear didn't vanish, but it was shouldered aside by a white-hot fury. This wasn't a ghost from my past anymore. This was a home invader. "Stay in the bedroom. Call the police," I yelled to Sarah as I lunged for the heaviest thing I could find, a thick glass vase on the entryway table. My hand closed around its base, the cool, smooth surface a stark contrast to the fire in my veins. I reached the front door in 2 strides, just as it started to swing open. I didn't hesitate. I raised the vase high above my head and charged through the doorway, roaring her name. The hallway outside was empty, dimly lit and utterly silent. The door to the stairwell at the far end was slowly closing with a soft whoosh from the hydraulic closer. She was gone. I stood there in the hallway, panting, the heavy vase held aloft, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. The adrenaline drained away as quickly as it had come, leaving me shaky and cold in my t-shirt and boxer shorts. Sarah appeared in the doorway behind me, phone pressed to her ear, her eyes wide with terror. "They're on their way," she said, her voice trembling. "I told them someone was in the apartment." I lowered the vase, my knuckles white from my grip. I walked back into the apartment, the violation of it all hitting me with the force of a physical blow. I scanned the living room, looking for anything out of place besides the soul-crushing fact that she had been inside. Nothing seemed to be missing. My wallet was on the counter. Sarah's purse was on a chair. The TV was still there. This wasn't a robbery. It was something far worse. It was a psychological home invasion. "How, Mark? How did she get in?" Sarah asked, her voice cracking. "The security bar was on. I saw you put it on." I walked to the door and knelt down. The security bar, a heavy steel rod that braced against the floor, was lying on its side. It hadn't been broken or forced. It had simply been lifted and set aside. The deadbolt was unlocked. The doorknob lock was unlocked, as if she had a key, as if she had just walked right in. But that didn't explain the security bar. We spent the next 20 minutes in a daze, waiting for the police. When they arrived, two tired-looking officers who seemed unimpressed by our story, my heart sank. We showed them the text messages. We showed them the horrifying picture she had taken of us in our bed. One of the officers, a stout man with a weary mustache, sighed. "So, let me get this straight. You think your ex-girlfriend, who you haven't seen in 3 years, somehow teleported into your third-floor apartment while it was barred from the inside, took a picture of you sleeping, then let herself out the front door?" His tone was thick with skepticism. "Look at the picture," I insisted, my voice rising with frustration. "Look at the angle. She was in the room. How else do you explain that?" "Could be an old photo she saved to mess with you," the other officer suggested, shining his flashlight around our bedroom doorway as if looking for footprints. "We see it all the time with messy breakups. They use old ammo to get a reaction." "It's not an old photo," Sarah cut in, her voice sharp. "That's the duvet cover I bought last month. We've only had it for 3 weeks." The officers exchanged a look. They took our statements, checked the windows and the fire escape, and found no signs of forced entry. They saw a locked apartment, a distraught couple, and a series of bizarre text messages. To them, it was just another domestic dispute, a he said, she said, with a technological twist. "Listen," the mustached officer said, his hand on his notepad. "We'll file a report, but honestly, without any signs of a break-in, there's not much we can do. She hasn't technically threatened you. She's just being a crazy ex. Our advice? Get a restraining order first thing Monday morning. Change the locks. Maybe get a security camera." They left, and their departure plunged us into an even deeper state of dread. The police couldn't help us. We were on our own. The law saw a messy breakup. I saw a monster who could defy locks and logic, a phantom who could walk through walls just to prove she could. We didn't sleep for the rest of the night. We sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sun begin to rise. The beautiful golden light of Saturday morning felt like a distant memory from another lifetime. This was Sunday morning now, the day she said she was coming, the day her parents were waiting. Just as the city was beginning to wake up, the birds chirping their morning songs, my phone buzzed. It was a new number this time, an unknown number. My stomach twisted into a knot. I knew who it was. She was probably using a burner app. I almost didn't look, but I had to. I had to know what fresh hell she was unleashing. I opened the message. It wasn't Chloe. The text was short, polite, and grammatically perfect, and it was 1,000 times more terrifying than anything Chloe had sent. "Mark, this is Susan, Chloe's mother. I am so sorry to bother you, but we seem to have the wrong address for your new place. Chloe is very distressed. She said she left her purse in your apartment last night when she stopped by to use the restroom, and she desperately needs the medicine inside it. We're just around the corner. Could you please send us the correct address so we can retrieve it? We're so worried." I read the message from Susan 3 times, and with each reading, a different layer of its diabolical genius revealed itself. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, a perfectly crafted narrative designed to neutralize every defense I had. First, the polite, apologetic tone from a concerned mother. It immediately framed them as the reasonable adults and me as the uncooperative party. Second, the lie about the wrong address. It was a preemptive strike, an explanation for why Chloe hadn't shown up on our doorstep yet, subtly suggesting they weren't the ones stalking me. They were just lost. But the real poison was in the details. She said she left her purse in your apartment last night when she stopped by to use the restroom. This single sentence did so much destructive work. It provided a fabricated, innocent reason for Chloe being inside my home, turning a terrifying home invasion into a casual visit. It was an alibi. If I ever tried to press charges, they had their story ready. Chloe had permission to be there. And the purse with the medicine inside, that was the emotional blackmail, the ticking time bomb. It wasn't about the $30,000 anymore. It was about life-saving medication for their poor, distressed daughter. If I refused to cooperate, I wasn't just being a difficult ex. I was a monster withholding critical medicine from a sick woman. They were building a case against me, painting me into a corner where any action I took, other than complete capitulation, would make me look like the villain. "They're a team," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me, the kind of calm that comes after the storm has passed and you're left standing in the wreckage. The panic was gone, replaced by a grim, steely certainty. This was all planned, every single step. I showed the phone to Sarah. She read the message, her face hardening. The fear was still in her eyes, but it was being eclipsed by a righteous fury that mirrored my own. "Use the restroom?" she scoffed, her voice dripping with contempt. Like she was a neighbor borrowing a cup of sugar, and they're just around the corner? They're playing games, Mark. They're circling us like sharks. "It's the oldest play in their book," I said, a wave of bitter memories washing over me. Create a crisis, then position themselves as the saviors who just need my help to solve it. Only this time, the crisis is that their daughter is a criminal who broke into our apartment. I stared at the blinking cursor on my phone, my mind racing. How to respond? Ignoring them was no longer an option. They had escalated far beyond that. They knew our address, or were close enough to it that it didn't matter. They were actively trying to engage me, to draw me out into the open. If I replied with anger, they would play the victim. If I called the police again, I'd be showing them a report with Susan's text on it, a message that sounded perfectly reasonable to an outsider. He won't even give my sick daughter her purse back. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice quiet. A plan, cold and sharp, began to form in my mind. For 3 years I had run. I had hidden. I had let the fear of them dictate my life. I had allowed the phantom of my past to hold power over me. No more. They wanted to play a game? Fine, we would play. But this time I was changing the rules. They thought they were dealing with the same timid, conflict-averse pushover I used to be. They were about to find out how much a person can change in 3 years. "We give them what they want," I said. Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion. "What? Mark, no, you can't let them come here. You can't give them a cent." "I'm not going to," I clarified, my voice steady. "I'm not giving them our address. I'm not giving them money. But they want a purse? We'll give them a purse." I looked around the room, my eyes landing on an old, forgotten tote bag Sarah used for groceries, slung over the back of a dining chair. "They want to meet? We'll meet. But it won't be here. It'll be on my terms, in a place where I control the board." I picked up my phone and began to type, my fingers moving with a newfound purpose. "Susan," I wrote. "I'm not sure how Chloe got in here last night, but she did not have my permission. I found a purse. I'm not comfortable with you coming to my home, but I'm willing to meet you to return it. There's a police station on the corner of Elm and 4th Street. I will be standing outside the main entrance in 1 hour. I will give you the purse there. This is the only way I will return it." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The ball was in their court. I had called their bluff. If their story was true, if all they wanted was the medicine, then meeting at a police station should be no problem. In fact, they should welcome the security of a public place. But I knew them. I knew this wasn't about medicine. It was about intimidation and control. The one place they couldn't intimidate or control me was on the front steps of a building full of cops. Sarah read the message over my shoulder. A slow smile spread across her face. "That's brilliant," she breathed. "They'll never agree to it." "Exactly," I said. "And when they refuse, I'll have a record of it. I offered to return your property at a police station, and you refused." Their entire concerned parent act falls apart. We waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity. My phone remained silent. The lack of an immediate, frantic reply was telling. They were conferring, panicking. Their carefully constructed plan had hit a snag they hadn't anticipated, a spine. Then my phone chimed. It was Susan. A police station? Oh dear, that sounds so dramatic and unnecessary. We're not trying to cause any trouble, Mark. We're just a family that's worried. Can't you just leave it on the front step for us? Or meet us at the coffee shop on the corner? It would be so much less intimidating for poor Chloe. I showed the phone to Sarah. Checkmate, I said. I typed my reply immediately. Police station, 1 hour. This is my only offer. After that, I'm turning the purse in as lost property. The grocery tote bag felt flimsy and light in my hand as I walked out of our apartment building 45 minutes later. I had put an old, empty bottle of aspirin inside to give it some weight, just in case. Sarah had insisted on coming, but I told her no. I had to do this alone. This was my fight, my past, and I needed to face it head on. She stood at the window watching me go, her face a mixture of fear and pride. The walk to the police station was only 10 minutes, but it felt like a marathon. The Sunday morning streets were quiet. Every car that passed, every person I saw, felt like a potential threat. Were they watching me right now? Was this all part of a more elaborate trap? I arrived, with 5 minutes to spare. The station was a modern brick and glass building, solid and imposing. A sense of security washed over me as I stood under the large blue sign that read, City Police Department. I was on safe ground. I checked my phone. It was 9:58 a.m., 2 minutes until my deadline. There were no new messages. I scanned the street, my heart starting to pound again. Maybe they weren't coming. Maybe my bluff had worked, and they had just given up. At exactly 10 a.m., a sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb directly in front of me. It was a car I knew well. It was Mark's. The passenger door opened, and Susan stepped out. She looked older, her face etched with new lines of stress, but she was wearing the same familiar expression of pained disappointment she had perfected years ago. She was alone. Mark, she said, her voice a fragile whisper. Thank you for coming. You have no idea how worried we've been. I said nothing. I just held up the tote bag. I wasn't going to get drawn into her script. She took a step toward me, her hand outstretched. Where's Chloe? I asked, my voice hard as stone. Susan flinched. She's not feeling well, the stress of all this. She's in the car. Mark, please, can I just have the purse? My eyes flickered to the blacked-out windows of the SUV. I couldn't see inside, but I could feel them. I could feel Chloe's presence, and I suspected her father was in the driver's seat. They hadn't come to talk. They had come to collect. I took a step back, pulling the bag away from her reach. No, let me see her. Let me see Chloe. Susan's face crumpled, the mask of concern shifting into something sharper, more frustrated. Don't be difficult, Mark. Just give me the bag. From behind me, the glass doors of the police station slid open. A tall, uniformed officer stepped out, taking a sip from a coffee cup. He nodded a curt morning in my direction as he leaned against the wall to enjoy the sunshine. Susan froze. Her eyes darted from me to the officer and back again. The frustration on her face was instantly replaced by panic. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Fine, I said, my voice low and clear, loud enough for the officer to hear if he was listening. You don't want the purse here? No problem. I'll just go inside and file a police report for breaking and entering. I've got screenshots of all your texts. And a photo your daughter took of me while I was asleep in my bed last night. I'm sure the detectives inside will be very interested to see it. I turned my back on her and took a deliberate step toward the entrance of the police station. Susan let out a choked cry of my name. It wasn't the sound of a concerned mother. It was the sound of a cornered animal. I heard a car door slam shut. Heavy running footsteps echoed on the pavement behind me. It wasn't Susan's. It was the frantic, pounding stride of a man. You little bastard! A voice roared, raw and full of fury. You think you can threaten my family? I spun around just as Mark, Chloe's father, reached me. His face was a contorted mask of rage, purple and swollen. He wasn't the calm, collected accomplice anymore. He was a bull seeing red. His arm was raised, his hand balled into a fist, aiming for my face. But he wasn't looking at my face. His eyes were locked on something just past my shoulder, his expression of rage suddenly morphing into one of pure, abject horror. The officer had dropped his coffee cup. It shattered on the pavement as he drew his weapon, and at that exact moment, from the open door of the SUV, I heard a woman's voice. It wasn't Chloe. It was a shaky, unfamiliar voice, cracking with fear, and it screamed 5 words that made the entire world stop turning. "Dad, no, you'll hit the baby!" Time seemed to warp and stretch, slowing to a crawl. The officer's shout of "Police! Get on the ground!" was a distant echo. Mark's fist, which had been hurtling towards my face, froze in mid-air, his arm locked in a grotesque tableau of aggression. His eyes, wide with a horror that eclipsed his rage, were fixed on the SUV. Susan stood petrified, her hand clamped over her mouth, a silent scream etched on her face. And that voice, that terrified, unfamiliar voice, hung in the air, vibrating with a meaning I couldn't yet comprehend. The baby. The word ricocheted around the inside of my skull. Baby? What baby? Was Chloe pregnant? The thought was so bizarre, so out of left field that my brain struggled to even process it. For 5 years, Chloe had been adamant about not wanting children. She'd called them career killers and little money leeches. The idea of her being pregnant was as plausible as her suddenly deciding to become a nun. The officer, now with his gun drawn and pointed squarely at Mark's chest, began advancing. "Sir, I said get on the ground, now!" The command broke the spell. Mark dropped his arm, his entire body deflating as if all the bones had been removed. He stumbled back a step, hands raised in a gesture of frantic surrender, his eyes still locked on the car. "I'm sorry," he stammered, not to the officer, but towards the SUV. "I'm so sorry, honey." From the back of the vehicle, a different door creaked open. A young woman, who couldn't have been much older than 20, slowly emerged. She was pale and trembling, her brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, and she was clutching a small, blanket-wrapped bundle to her chest. It was a baby, a tiny, sleeping infant, oblivious to the high-stakes drama unfolding on the sidewalk. And this woman, she was a complete stranger. I had never seen her before in my life. "Who is that?" I breathed, the question directed at no one in particular. The young woman looked from her father because it was suddenly horribly clear that Mark and Susan were her parents to the police officer and then to me. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying for hours. She looked terrified, trapped, and utterly exhausted. She was the polar opposite of the polished, confident Chloe I remembered. And then it hit me. This wasn't Chloe. This was her younger sister, Becca. I had only met Becca a handful of times during my 5 years with Chloe. She was the black sheep of the family, the quiet, artistic one who had left for college on the West Coast the moment she turned 18 and rarely came back. Chloe had always spoken of her with a dismissive, slightly jealous tone, calling her flaky and unreliable. Looking at her now, clutching a newborn baby in the shadow of a police station, I realized flaky was probably Chloe's word for independent. Becca was the one who had escaped, or so I'd thought. "What is going on?" the officer demanded, his gun still steady on Mark. Another patrol car, sirens silent but lights flashing, was already pulling up behind the SUV. Susan finally found her voice. "It's a misunderstanding, officer," she pleaded, rushing to her husband's side. "A family disagreement, that's all. We were just trying to get my daughter's medicine back from him." She pointed a trembling finger at me. Becca took a hesitant step forward, clutching the baby even tighter. "He's lying," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "It's my medicine. It's for the baby. It's in my diaper bag." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. The bag Chloe took from my apartment yesterday. The puzzle pieces began to slam into place, forming a picture more monstrous than I could ever have imagined. The $30,000. It wasn't for some vague, mysterious illness of Chloe's. Chloe wasn't the one who was sick. The baby was. And Chloe hadn't just found my address. She had stolen a diaper bag from her own sister, a new mother, and was holding her child's medicine for ransom. But she wasn't ransoming it from Becca. She was using it as leverage to extort money from me. It was a level of cruelty and calculation that was breathtaking. My drama with Chloe was just the stage. This poor girl and her sick infant were the real victims. The rage I felt earlier was a pale imitation of the inferno that now consumed me. They hadn't just invaded my home, they had weaponized a baby. They had put a child's health at risk as part of their sick, manipulative game. "The bag is empty," I said, my voice dangerously calm. I held up the flimsy tote bag for everyone to see. There's nothing in it, because Chloe didn't leave a purse in my apartment last night. She broke in, took a picture of me and my girlfriend sleeping, and then terrorized us all night. This was never about medicine. It was about this. I pulled out my phone and showed the nearest officer the picture Chloe had taken from my bedroom doorway. The officer's eyes widened as he looked at the photo, then back at our third-floor apartment window down the street. His expression shifted from professional caution to genuine alarm. Mark and Susan started talking at once, a frantic cascade of denials and explanations. He's making it up. He's obsessed with our daughter. We were worried he was going to hurt her. My diaper bag, Becca repeated, her voice rising in panic as she looked at the empty tote in my hand. Where is my diaper bag? The prescription is in there. The hospital just filled it yesterday. He needs it. Suddenly, from the driver's side of the SUV, the final player in this grotesque family theater decided to make her entrance. The door swung open and Chloe stepped out. She looked exactly the same as I remembered, impeccably dressed in designer jeans and a silk blouse, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She surveyed the scene. Her father being held at gunpoint, her mother babbling hysterically, her sister on the verge of a breakdown, with an expression of bored annoyance, as if she had just walked into a movie 10 minutes late. She was holding a stylish, expensive-looking leather diaper bag, Becca's bag. Oh, for God's sake, Chloe sighed, rolling her eyes. Can everyone just calm down? This is so embarrassing. She sauntered towards us, holding the diaper bag aloft like a trophy. Here, she said, thrusting it not at her sister but at me. Happy now? You got your stupid bag back. Now can you please give us the money so we can go? The baby's hospital bill isn't going to pay itself. The sheer, unmitigated gall of her statement sucked the air from my lungs. Even with a police officer pointing a gun at her father, even with her sister crying, she was still running the con. She truly believed in that moment that she was in control, that this was all a transaction that had gone slightly off the rails. Becca let out a sob and lunged for the bag, but Chloe held it out of her reach. Not so fast, she sneered at her sister. You get this back when he pays. Chloe, stop it, Susan shrieked, finally seeming to grasp the gravity of their situation. Give her the bag. No, Chloe's voice was a whip crack. He owes us. He owes me for 5 years of my life. This is the least he can do. I looked past Chloe's smug, entitled face, past her terrified parents, and I looked at Becca. I saw the raw desperation in her eyes, the terror of a new mother willing to do anything to protect her child, and I realized that Chloe had miscalculated. She thought she was targeting my old weakness, my desire to be the hero, the savior. But she had inadvertently targeted my new strength, my absolute refusal to let anyone suffer the way I had, especially not for the sake of a game. You're right, Chloe, I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the tense silence. You're right. It is time to pay. I took a step towards her. The officer tensed, shouting, Sir, stay back! But I wasn't looking at Chloe. I was looking at the diaper bag, and I wasn't reaching for my wallet. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the small, powerful tool I had started carrying after she broke into my home. It was a personal alarm, a device that emitted a deafening, piercing shriek designed to disorient attackers. And I also knew, from my brief career in event security in college, that the specific frequency it used was notorious for interfering with certain types of electronic devices. Devices like the sleek, top-of-the-line cochlear implant that Chloe had worn since a childhood illness had left her almost completely deaf in one ear. The one she so proudly told me years ago had cost her parents over $30,000. I held up the alarm and looked her directly in the eye. Give your sister the bag, I said calmly, or the whole world goes silent. Chloe's mask of bored indifference shattered. For the first time, a flicker of genuine fear appeared in her eyes. It wasn't the fear of getting arrested or of her family's drama being exposed. It was something more primal, more personal. She knew exactly what I was holding, and she knew I knew exactly what it could do. But the cochlear implant was her pride and joy, a symbol of her parents' devotion and wealth, a piece of sophisticated technology that allowed her to navigate the world with perfect hearing. But it had a vulnerability, a weakness to certain electronic frequencies, a fact she'd once let slip during an argument after her implant had cut out near a department store's security sensor. It was a piece of information I had filed away and forgotten, a useless bit of trivia from a past life, until now. You wouldn't, she breathed, her voice losing its sharp, confident edge. She took an involuntary step back, clutching the diaper bag to her chest like a shield. 5 years, Chloe, I said, my voice low and even, keeping my eyes locked on hers. 5 years of fake emergencies, 5 years of lies, 5 years of cleaning up your messes. You used your own sister's sick baby as a pawn in your game to get money from me. I think you'll find I would do a lot of things I wouldn't have done before. The police officers were shouting now, confused by this new development. Sir, put that device down. What is that? But I ignored them. The world had narrowed to the space between me and Chloe. Mark and Susan were frozen, their faces a canvas of confusion and terror. They had no idea what I was holding or what I was threatening to do, but they could see the raw fear on their golden child's face. Give Becca the bag, I said, enunciating each word. Chloe's eyes darted around, looking for an escape, an angle, a new lie that could get her out of this. But there was none. There was just the cold reality of the situation. A half-dozen police officers, her hysterical family and me, holding a small plastic device that held the power to plunge her into a world of muffled silence. A world she hadn't experienced since she was a child. With a snarl of pure hatred, she shoved the diaper bag at Becca. "Fine, take your stupid bag," she spat, her voice venomous. Becca snatched it, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the zipper. She pulled out a small, amber-colored bottle of prescription drops and a sterile-looking syringe, clutching them to her chest with a sob of relief. It was over. The hostage was free. The moment the bag was out of Chloe's hands, the lead officer moved in. "All right, that's enough," he said, his voice firm. He and his partners separated the family, expertly de-escalating the situation. Mark and Susan were guided to one patrol car, Chloe to another, while a third officer spoke gently to Becca, who was now sitting on the curb, rocking her baby and crying softly. I finally lowered the personal alarm, my hand trembling from the adrenaline. The lead officer, the one with the mustache who had been so skeptical just hours before, walked over to me. His expression was completely different now. There was a respect in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You want to tell me what the hell that was all about?" he asked, nodding towards the alarm in my hand. I explained. I told him everything. About the 5 years of manipulation, the escape to a new city, the text messages, the break-in, the photo, and the final twisted plot involving her sister and the baby's medicine. I showed him the Zelle request for $30,000. I showed him Susan's texts. I showed him everything. He listened intently, taking notes, his expression growing grimmer with every detail. As I was talking, Sarah came running down the street. She must have been watching from the window, and the arrival of more police cars had sent her into a panic. She saw me, saw that I was safe, and threw her arms around me, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. "I saw them pull up," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I saw him go after you. I was so scared." "I'm okay," I whispered, holding her back. "It's over. It's really over." The police ended up arresting Mark for attempted assault. His lunge at me in front of an officer was too blatant to ignore. Chloe was taken into custody for questioning regarding the break-in and extortion. Susan, hysterical and uncooperative, was put in the back of a patrol car to calm down while they sorted everything out. The entire family, the architects of my misery, were dismantled and carted away in a matter of minutes. Becca was the last one left. A female officer was helping her, getting the baby a bottle of formula from a kit in her trunk. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and shame. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. You didn't have to do that. You saved us." "They put you in an impossible position," I said. "None of this was your fault." She shook her head, tears welling up again. "I knew they were like this. That's why I left. When Leo got sick, the doctors said he has a rare respiratory condition. The medication is expensive, even with insurance. I made the mistake of mentioning it to my mom on the phone. I guess Chloe overheard." Her voice broke. "I never thought she would do this. I never thought they would sink this low." It was the family curse, the belief that they couldn't possibly sink any lower, followed by the horrifying discovery of a whole new basement of depravity. In the end, Sarah and I spent the rest of our Sunday giving statements at the station. We handed over our phones as evidence. The police were building a solid case. The picture Chloe took was the nail in her coffin. The metadata proved exactly when and where it was taken. Her own text messages and the Zelle request corroborated my story of extortion. Combined with her father's assault and Becca's testimony, the perfect, untouchable family was finally facing real consequences. We walked home late that afternoon, the streets now bathed in the gentle light of the setting sun. The air felt lighter. The city seemed quieter. Our apartment, once a violated crime scene, now felt like a sanctuary again. As we walked up the steps, I saw a small piece of paper tucked into our door. It was a note, written in a shaky but neat hand. It was from Becca. She had gotten our address from the police report. "I can never thank you enough for what you did," it read. "My parents have posted bail, and I'm sure they'll get Chloe out soon, too. I'm taking Leo and getting as far away from here as I can. I don't know what will happen with the court case, but I will testify, I promise. They can't be allowed to do this to anyone else. I left something for you with your building manager. It's not much, but it's the only way I can think of to thank you for giving my son a future." We went to the building manager's office. He handed us a small, slightly worn jewelry box. I opened it with a sense of trepidation. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a simple, elegant pair of diamond stud earrings. They were beautiful and clearly worth a lot of money. Tucked underneath them was another, smaller, note. "These were my grandmother's, the only thing of value my family never managed to take from me. I want you to have them. Please sell them. Start your new life over again, somewhere they can never find you. You deserve that." I closed the box, a lump forming in my throat. Sarah squeezed my hand. We didn't need the money. My new life had already started. But the gesture, the sacrifice from a woman who had so little, was overwhelming. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings. Chloe and her father were charged. The evidence was overwhelming. They hired a team of expensive lawyers who tried to paint me as a vindictive ex, but the digital trail was undeniable. One afternoon, about a month after that horrible Sunday, I received a certified letter in the mail. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. My heart sank, assuming it was some new legal maneuvering from Chloe's team. My hand shook slightly as I tore it open. It wasn't from Chloe's lawyers. It was from an estate attorney. The letter was brief and formal. It informed me that a distant great-uncle of mine, a man I had met only once at a family reunion when I was a child, had passed away. I remembered him vaguely as a quiet, eccentric old man who had made a fortune in early tech investments and lived a reclusive life. The letter stated that he had no children of his own and had left his considerable estate to be divided among his few surviving relatives. I scanned the legalese, my eyes searching for the bottom line, and then I saw it. A number that made me sit down hard on the nearest chair. A number that made Chloe's demand for $30,000 seem like a child asking for lunch money. A number that would change my life forever. But as I stared at the page, a cold, unsettling thought began to creep into my mind. Chloe's family had proven they could find me once. If they ever found out about this, they wouldn't just send texts. They would start a war. And I had a terrifying feeling that their first target wouldn't be me. It would be the one person they knew could hurt me the most. The one person whose address was now a matter of public record in their court documents, Sarah. The number on the page seemed to hum with a dangerous energy. It was a life-changing amount of money, the kind of sum that solves every problem you've ever had while creating a host of new ones you can't yet imagine. My first instinct was a tidal wave of relief, a dizzying vision of a future free from financial worry, a future where Sarah and I could do anything, go anywhere. But that vision was immediately poisoned by the shadow of my past. This inheritance wasn't just a blessing, it was a beacon. It was a giant flashing neon sign that would inevitably attract the predators I had just managed to fight off. I looked over at Sarah, who was humming to herself as she watered the plants on our windowsill, completely unaware that our world had just tilted on its axis. The thought of Chloe's family, consumed by greed and a thirst for revenge, turning their sights on her, made my blood run cold. They knew her name. They knew where she lived. They had seen, firsthand, how much she meant to me. She was no longer just my girlfriend. In their twisted minds, she was my weakness, my leverage point. The earrings Becca had given us felt heavy in my pocket, a symbol of a sacrifice made for a fresh start. Now this inheritance felt like a gilded cage, locking us right back into the path of danger. I couldn't let that happen. I had spent 3 years building a life of peace, and I had just fought a war to protect it. I would not let a surprise windfall of money, no matter how large, be the thing that destroyed it all. That evening, I sat Sarah down and told her everything. I showed her the letter, and I watched her eyes go wide at the number. Then I watched as that surprise was replaced by the same wary, protective look I had seen in her eyes that first Saturday morning. She understood immediately. "They can't know," she said, her voice firm. "Not just for our safety, but for Becca's, too. Can you imagine what they'd do if they knew you had this kind of money? They'd use it to crush her, to take her baby, to ruin her life as punishment for testifying against them." She was right. The stakes were so much bigger than just us now. We had an obligation to protect the person who had risked everything to do the right thing. The next day, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to the estate attorney, to formally accept the inheritance and begin the process. The second was to a high-end security consultant, a firm that specialized in asset protection and personal security for the wealthy. I explained the situation in broad, careful strokes: a substantial inheritance, an unstable and litigious ex-partner, and the need for absolute ironclad discretion. The plan we formulated was complex, but beautiful in its simplicity. We were going to disappear, not as fugitives, but as ghosts. The security firm helped me set up a series of trusts and shell corporations, a financial labyrinth that would make the money virtually untraceable to my personal name. My old life, my old identity, would be methodically scrubbed from the internet, buried under layers of digital misdirection. My name would fade from public records, replaced by the sterile anonymity of a numbered company. While the financial wizards did their work, Sarah and I prepared for our own departure. We didn't sell our things or have a big going-away party. That would leave a trail. Instead, we started quietly donating our belongings piece by piece. We scanned old photos, digitizing our memories. Our apartment, once a home filled with the texture of our life together, slowly became an empty, anonymous space. It was a strange, bittersweet process, dismantling the very sanctuary we had fought so hard to protect. But we weren't being chased out this time. We were choosing to leave, on our own terms. The last piece of the puzzle was Becca. I couldn't just vanish without making sure she and her son were safe. Through the prosecutor's office, I arranged to set up an anonymous trust for her and Leo. It wasn't a handout, but a safety net. It would cover all of Leo's medical expenses for the rest of his life, pay for his education, and provide Becca with a stipend that would allow her to raise her son without the constant fear of financial ruin hanging over her head. The funds would be disbursed through a third-party administrator with no connection to me whatsoever. She would never know where it came from, only that she and her son were finally, truly free from her family's toxic influence. It was the best use of my great-uncle's money I could possibly imagine. On the day of Chloe and Mark's sentencing, Sarah and I were already gone. We received a text from one of the detectives on the case letting us know the outcome. Mark got a suspended sentence and probation for the assault, but Chloe, thanks to the mountain of evidence of stalking, breaking and entering, and extortion, was sentenced to 2 years in prison. It wasn't a life sentence, but it was a consequence, a real one. For the first time in her life, Chloe was going to be held accountable for her actions, locked in a place where her parents' money and influence meant nothing. Our final destination was a small, quiet town on the Pacific coast, thousands of miles away from our old life, a town where the loudest sounds were the crashing of the waves and the cry of the gulls. We bought a modest house with a big garden, set on a cliff overlooking the ocean. We had new names, new identities, and a quiet, unassuming life. The vast majority of the inheritance sat untouched in its labyrinth of trusts, a silent guardian for our future. We lived on the interest, which was more than enough to afford us a life of simple, peaceful freedom. One evening, about a year after we had settled in, Sarah and I were sitting on our porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. A gentle breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine. I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost overwhelming. The ghost of my past had been well and truly exorcised. I was scrolling idly through a national news feed on my phone when a small headline from my old city caught my eye. Disgraced socialite Susan Miller files for bankruptcy, following daughter's release. My thumb hovered over the link. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The article was short. It detailed how Susan and Mark's finances had collapsed under the weight of their legal fees. Their attempt to sue me for emotional distress had been thrown out of court, costing them a fortune. After Chloe's release, their attempts to reintegrate into their old social circles had been a dismal failure. The story of what they had done, using a sick baby as a pawn, had made them pariahs. They had lost everything they truly valued: their money, their reputation, their status. Mark had left Susan and Chloe, unable to leech off her parents any longer, and with a criminal record making it impossible to find the kind of glamorous job she felt she deserved, had reportedly moved into a tiny, run-down apartment on the other side of the country. They hadn't just been defeated, they had been rendered completely and utterly irrelevant. Their power, which had once seemed so absolute, had been built on a foundation of smoke and mirrors, and it had vanished the moment they were met with real resistance and consequence. I closed the article and put my phone away. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder, her hand finding mine. "What is it?" she asked softly. "Nothing," I said, and for the first time it was the absolute truth. Absolutely nothing. The last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, and the first stars began to appear in the deep, velvety twilight. We sat there in comfortable silence, listening to the rhythm of the ocean. They had demanded $30,000 and a bag of food. They had tried to take my peace, my home, and my future. But in the end, all they had managed to do was destroy themselves. And I, in my quiet little house by the sea, had finally gotten everything I had ever truly wanted. A life that was completely and blessedly my own.